Hey, ocean travelers around the world. This is the Sargasso Sea, a floating maze of calm waters and weird lore.
A motionless blue patch ringed by racing currents, home to drifting forests, newborn turtles, migrating eels, glassy calms, and centuries of sea stories. A wooden brig from the 1700s lies stalled in a pane of water that looks like poured glass. The sails hang like tired laundry. Around the hull, a golden mesh of seaweed brushes the planks and clicks softly against the rudder. Men lean over the rail and watch coils of weed slide past like slow braids. One points to tiny beads on the fronds that look like grapes. Another mutters that the ship is caught. The log that night will call the water dead calm and the weed endless. Centuries later, a modern sailor in a fiberglass sloop slips from the transom into water, so clear that the shadow of the hull looks like a cutout on blue air. He floats among caramel leaves flecked with silver fish the size of a finger. In orbit above them both, a satellite camera catches a pale turquoise oval in the midst of deeper cobalt. From space it looks like an eye light in the middle, darker all around. 3 snapshots, one place, a calm sea that appears to stand still and yet quietly moves the world. The box is easy to draw in words. This sea is not bounded by land, but by motion. In the west, the Gulf Stream rushes north like a river laid on salt. In the north, the North Atlantic Current swings that river east. Along the far side, the Canary Current slides south. And across the bottom edge, the North Equatorial Current drives west. Between those 4 moving walls sits an oval of quieter water, still by comparison, not still like stone, where surface wind and earth spin team up to push floating things inward. That inward nudge makes a slow mound of water and a gentle downslope from the edge toward the middle. In that middle, seaweed gathers, stories collect, and travelers learn a long lesson in patience. The engine underneath the calm isn't magic, it's a set of steady pushes people can feel without needing a single equation. Prevailing winds blow around the subtropics because Earth rotates. Surface water does not move exactly where the wind points it. It slides a little to the right in the northern hemisphere. Stack the effect through the top layer, and the flow leans inward. Oceanographers call this the subtropical gyre. The result is a slow convergence at the center. Convergence smooths chop, presses the surface very slightly downward, and herds floating life into lines, streaks and mats. The seaweed that rules here, Sargassum, does not need a seafloor. It grows at the surface, weaves into rafts, fragments, and then reweaves. The rafts are not thick carpets, but braided islands that flex with the swell. They gather where the lines of slick water form, pulled together by the same subtle hands that flatten the waves. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you really enjoy and want to fall asleep with ocean stories whenever you want. The same physics that makes the water look motionless also builds a maze that shifts every day. Long streaks called windrows align with the breeze, then break as small eddies peel away from the edges. Eddies push a ribbon of weed into an arc, then undo their work by evening. A boat can spend a week seeing the same palette, blue as a bottle, gold as straw, and never cross the exact same pattern twice. From a helm, the scene repeats. From a map, the undercurrent of change is obvious. Let's go step by step and turn the calm picture into a living one. The first pages anyone wrote about this place came from logs with neat handwriting and patient eyes. Early navigators described fields of seaweed and sometimes guessed the weed grew from a bank just below. Many worried the fronds would snare their rudders and strangle speed. In practice, the mats slid away. A ship could drag strands in the wake or clog an intake if unlucky, but the sea did not become a solid mat you could walk on. The word Sargasso came from the grape-like bladders that keep the plant afloat. Sargasso, a name sailors borrowed because the beads looked like tiny clusters. The label stuck to charts and then to stories, until the sea's name stood for both a real patch and an idea calm as a force. Calm, wrote the lore. But calm is not a permanent state. Weather systems make and unmake wind. Even in the hoarse latitudes, the subtropical high often parks gentle high pressure over the oval, flattening the sea for days. Traders in the age of sail hated that stillness, because miles came from air in canvas. A week of mirror water sounds like poetry. To a captain paid by delivery time, it sounded like risk. But calm did not mean dead. The currents still carried ships west or north without help. Just slowly, a helmsman could wake to the same glitter and yet find the noon sight showing progress. That felt like a trick. No breeze. Still miles gained. Quick fact, in this sea the horizon can lie emotionally. The compass and the log tell the truth. Sargasso makes the calm visible. Up close, a mat looks like a forest in miniature. The fronds fork and curl. The bladders shine like pale amber and pop with a soft crack, if pinched. The plant is pelagic, born and living entirely offshore. It doesn't break off from a shoreline forest. It is the forest. Tiny crabs squat under leaf curls like tenants under awnings. Shrimps the color of honey skitter, comical fish shaped like the weed itself hover and then lunge. Their disguise so exact that a hand's shadow must move to reveal them. A sargassum fish can live its entire life in one floating clump, waiting for small prey to wander too close. Nudibranch graze, juvenile filefish flicker. The mat breathes with the sun. During daylight it produces oxygen fast enough to fizz faintly at the edges. At night the chemistry flips. The raft is a city in the calm. Food, shelter, shade, and ambush all made from plant architecture and light. The mats are not fixed rafts with addresses. They are neighborhoods that merge, split, and rejoin. A fresh gale tears long streaks into confetti. The confetti gathers into streaks again when the wind slackens and convergence resumes. A scientist's net thrown over the side pulls up a strange, cheerful chaos. Fronds dancing with copepods, mantis shrimp glaring from the mesh, and a single juvenile jack hiding like a child under a tablecloth. The onboard note might read, Sargassum Community. Diverse water startlingly clear. The clarity is not just pretty, it is a clue. The Sargasso Sea is famously blue because it is famously lean. Oligotrophic water, low in nutrients, lets light run deep. Phytoplankton, the tiny plants that tint water green elsewhere, are sparse here. With little fertilizer in the surface layers, the water stays diamond clear. That does not mean lifeless. It means the life is arranged differently. Thin in the open water, thick inside the weed. The mats hack the system by creating their own micro-worlds. They catch dust, bird droppings, and tiny bits of broken organisms. They slow the water just enough for small particles to settle among the fronds. They shade and shelter the grazers that would be snacks in bare blue. Each raft becomes an oasis hovering over a desert. Predators cruise the edges, the ecotone, where the golden edge meets the highway blue. A mahi darts in, flashes, and leaves. A small tuna threads the border like a seamstress. A storm petrel taps its feet on the surface and nips at tiny things flushed from cover. Newborns come here on purpose. Loggerhead and green turtles hatch from sandy nests and sprint to the surf like wind-up toys. Offshore currents catch them and nudge them toward safety in brown. Inside the rafts, young turtles become shadows in dappled light. They rest on leaves, nip at crusted snacks, and ride like tourists on the ocean's slowest parade float. Years later they will be larger and bolder and wander farther, but this is their nursery. Birds passing overhead will sometimes land to rest. Yes, in the middle of the ocean, because a thick mat makes a momentary raft for feet that need a pause. The calm grants this small kindness again and again. The greatest commuters in this story are invisible at first. Eels. For more than a century, people tried to answer a simple question. Where do the eels that live in rivers come from? The answer traced back to this sea. American and European eels spend most of their lives in fresh water or coastal estuaries. As adults, they silver up, skin bright, eyes large, and disappear seaward. Months later, the tiniest leaf-shaped larvae, called leptocephali, drift toward continents like glass confetti. They change bodies as they go, turning into transparent glass eels, then pigmented elvers, then yellow eels that grow big in quiet streams. Years pass, then the cycle flips, and silver eels head for deep blue again. Scientists followed lengths, stages, and seasons backward until the origin circle closed within this gyre. They tagged adults on the continental shelf and watched for direction. They measured larvae and plotted them against time. Small farthest east for the European species, slightly larger closer to Europe, which told them the hatchery lay back toward the center. No one needed to scare anyone with deep-diving details. The simple arc was enough. A life loop that starts and ends in the calm patch bounded by currents. For a narrator who wants calm clarity, the eel tale also teaches a method: notice patterns, follow small clues, and resist the urge to claim more than the dead offer. The Sargasso Sea shows up again and again in that style of science. Drifters set loose at the edge find their way into the middle, then circle lazily until an eddy brushes them out. Satellite color maps reveal faint green halos where mats concentrate plankton and then blur into blue when the rafts break apart. Altimetry, a way of reading small changes in sea surface height from orbit, draws subtle domes and bowls that help forecast where weed will gather tomorrow. A captain reading the surface sees simpler signs: a line of caramel across the bow, a streak of cat's paws on glass, a slick that smells faintly of plants in sunlight. Logs from different centuries share an emotion that never quite leaves the page, a mix of calm and unease. A becalmed week turns events small. Laundry dries, wood creaks, the cook complains that the freshwater barrels taste of resin. The most interesting thing becomes the way a sargassum crab flips itself over with a lazy elegance. A century later, a sailor on a fiberglass boat writes that the sea felt empty and crowded at the same time. Nothing to hear but the slap of water, and everywhere these golden veins like a map of roads to nowhere. That line, written in a small hand, says as much about the mental weather of calm as it does about any current. The idea that ships could get trapped in seaweed forever belongs to books, not to hulls. In reality, what slowed vessels was the wind, not the weed. Thick lines could foul a propeller, and crews learned to pop gear into reverse for a moment, to fling off strands, or kill the engine and clear the intake screen with a gaff. An intake clogged by chopped weed could overheat an engine if no one was watching. A careful skipper kept an eye on temperatures and learned the sound of a happy flow. Watch out for this, says every good voyaging manual in its own way. If the water is a carpet of leaves, treat your intakes like lungs. Keep them clear and breathe easy. Storms visit the calm. 2. A passing hurricane does not respect the quiet. High winds can push rafts together into thick golden arcs, then tear those arcs to threads, then fling the threads out of the oval entirely. When the eye passes, the sea sits oddly, swell from two directions, the top layer turned over, weed rearranged like furniture after a party. A crew can sail across a patch that was thick a week ago and see nothing but blue. Return 2 weeks later, and the lines are back, regrouped. The maze resets itself on a schedule the ocean likes, not on one people prefer. Under the mats, a vertical drama plays out daily. At noon, light spears down and small fish hide in the shade. At dusk, a migration rises from the depths as plankton and tiny creatures climb the water column to feed in safety of dark. The mat becomes a ceiling under which nightwork blossoms. In the morning the column settles. The clarity of the Sargasso Sea lets eyes watch farther. Predators use sight more than in greener waters. At the same time, the absence of noise, fewer ships than coastal lanes, means the soundscape is quiet. Snap one shrimp and hear it. That quiet shapes behavior. A dolphin pod clicking through weed lines sounds like popcorn at a respectful distance. Eddies carve the daily shuffle. The subtropical gyre suggests a simple circle, but the real ocean loves spirals and swirls. Mesoscale eddies, whirlpools tens to hundreds of kilometers across, pinch off from currents and spin like slow galaxies. An eddy edge can pin a weed line in place for days. The next passing eddy steals it. From a satellite, the dance looks like soft fingerprints pressed into water. From a deck, it looks like a line that slides just as a crew tries to follow it. Mapping a place with no shores is a different kind of cartography. There is no lighthouse to fix a corner, no river mouth to mark start. Scientists use drifters, small buoys with tails that catch the water below the surface, to let the sea write its own arrow. They read color from space to mark blooms. They fly altimeters that sense the sea's small bulges and dips. They draw transects with research ships, their wake writing straight lines across a curved world. The atlas that results looks abstract, until a captain holds it next to a bow and sees a predicted weed corridor sitting exactly where yesterday's model said it would. Small case files bring the maze to life. An age of sail calm. A captain writes, "No wind since Sunday, the sea a mirror. We are beset with Sargasso. Men grumble. The weed drifts alongside like fleets." He trims the crew's fear by demonstrating that a boat hook meets no resistance. The ship is not trapped. It is bored. A derelict drifting for months. A weather-beaten hull without crew crosses the oval at the pace of sleep, fouled with weed on every cleat. Birds use it as a resting bar. When a patrol finally finds it, the logbook is blank after a stormy week far to the west. Proof that the sea can move tragedies slowly, until someone asks, a modern yacht dodging thick lines of weed. The skipper radios a friend. All clear water until 24 bajan in. Then heavy bands. Had to stop 3 times to clear the strainer. Otherwise dreamy. Science cruises add crisp beats. A plankton tow through a pale slick yields a micro-zoo, copods, arrowworms, fish larvae shaped like glass slivers, and a juvenile crab that clings to a leaf like a commuter to a strap. An autonomous underwater vehicle swims under a mat and films the underside like a cathedral ceiling, with shafts of light punching through and small fish tilting to stay in the glow. A drifter launched at the edge loops for months, drawing circles the size of small countries, then finally slips out like a marble crossing into a neighboring track. Each cruise returns with data and a small story that makes the sea's personality easier to hold. The Bermuda Triangle overlaps the map enough to confuse minds that like neat shapes. A clean sentence solves it. The triangle is a pop label connecting 3 points by legend. The Sargasso Sea is a physical feature defined by currents. The two overlap in space but not in idea. The Sargasso's truths, calm spells, converging flotsam, weed lines, show up in the triangle's tails because the same water sits beneath both. The movie myths about compasses spinning and ships swallowed by weed do not survive a day of real sailing. What does survive is the right kind of awe. The feeling that a big ocean can look like a calm room and still be full of moving parts. Migratory highways cross the maze even when nothing visible marks the lanes. Fish ride thermal layers. Birds time crossings to meet winds. Eels let the sea carry them for months, then climb streams with the kind of stubbornness that looks like myth until someone films it quietly. The secret behind all of these is timing. In the open ocean, brute force wastes energy, rhythm wins. Human fingerprints show up too. And they matter. Microplastics collect where weed collects, because the same physics that herds fronds herds fragments. Ghost nets lost fishing gear, snag rafts and turn them into traps for turtles and fish. A careful script separates facts. The Sargasso Sea is not a solid trash island. It is a convergence where natural rafts mingle with flotsam. Cleanups at sea face the same challenge as any open water plan. The patch is spread thin over huge distances, and new input flows constantly from coasts. Smarter policy on shore keeps the maze cleaner than any one boat offshore can. Another separation helps viewers think straight. The Great Atlantic Sargasso Belt versus the Sargasso Sea. The belt is a seasonal, tropical zone bloom that can stretch across the Atlantic in certain years and pile onto Caribbean beaches in huge, smelly heaps. Different nutrients, different drivers, and different consequences run that story. The Sargasso Sea is the subtropical gyre core. Farther north, calmer, and a long-term nursery. Confusing the two makes for messy conversations on beaches and on screens. The simplest fix is to name them plainly, in every sentence. Warming and stratification press on the calm. A warmer surface strengthens the layering in the upper ocean, making it harder for deep, nutrient-rich water to break through and feed life at the top. In the Sargasso, that might mean even clearer water, fewer background plankton, and a stronger reliance on mats for concentrated life. Researchers watch how the rafts respond, whether they grow denser lines or spread thinner, whether small animals shift timing, whether young turtles find enough cover when storms outnumber calms. Nothing in the ocean changes alone. Old-school routing treated the Sargasso like a sleeping dog. Respect the space, use the edges. Sailing ships hugged the Gulf Stream when northbound to borrow speed and warmed their hands at the Canary Current when slipping south and east toward Europe. Captains traded calm for certainty and timed their crossings to catch the trades. Read ahead could be a warning for the engine era and a waypoint in the age of sail. Where there are lines of weed, there is often a line of convergence, and where there's a line, the wind can be tricky. A good navigator banked patience. The Sargasso shows up in insurance files and mail packet logs because ships spent time here. Where traffic concentrates, records multiply. A claim for a late delivery might cite a fortnight of light and variable airs and 30. A packet captain might write that the weed was so thick at times we might have reaped it. Then add the practical note that the crew rigged a screen over the intake to protect the engine. Those prosaic details are why the calm became a character in maritime writing. The sea made people write about small things, and small things make stories linger. Modern voyagers play the maze with updated toys and the same minds. Racing yachts hate weed because a single frond on a keel fin can slow a boat enough to lose a race. Crews carry weed knives on poles and train themselves to back down quickly to clear the foil. Cruisers annotate pilot charts with squiggles, where they hit lines thick enough to stop and clean. A captain on a delivery notes that the water maker ran hot and solved it by hosing the intake until a brown curl of chopped weed flushed out. These scenes are not dramatic, they are universal. Calm water asks for attention, not heroics. Cameras love the mats, but struggle to tell their whole story. From above, a drone frames a living tapestry. From below, an ROA shows a dusky underworld with streets of shadow and light. Simple boat tests fill gaps. Toss a dip net. Take a photograph with the horizon in frame for scale. Write down GPS and watercolor, and build a 5-minute life list. A child with a magnifying glass over a bucket becomes an oceanographer in 10 heartbeats. This is a museum that does not mind small hands. Chemistry runs under every living snapshot. At noon, dissolved oxygen peaks at the mat top, where photosynthesis is strongest. A few meters down, the curve bends differently. Nutrients trickle in from deep when storms mix layers or when eddies bring a lick of richer water from the edge. Otherwise, the surface stays clean as an empty plate. The mats hack that poverty by collecting crumbs. That is the story. A poor pantry turned into a picnic by architecture and patience. Sound and light are the quietest chapters. The Sargasso has fewer shipping lanes than coasts, so the baseline hum is low. A hydrophone hears individual events. A dolphin click, a fish grunt, a distant ship like a sigh. Light runs deep, revealing silver fish at depths that would be dark green elsewhere. Predators can hunt by sight farther into the day. Night flips the rules. The raft becomes a shadow theater. The question people ask at this point is simple. Who protects a sea with no borders? The answer is a patchwork of effort. The Sargasso Sea Commission, backed by partner states and organizations, works to champion conservation across an area beyond national jurisdiction. That phrase, ABNJ, means no single country draws lines here. High seas governance is slow, built from agreements and best practices. It is not as satisfying as a fence, but it can work when enough hands hold the same rope. Fishing around mats demands particular care. They are natural fish aggregators, so nets set the wrong way can scoop up bycatch along with the target species. Ethical practice means watching for turtles, checking gear often, and leaving the habitat as intact as possible. Research permits ask for the same care. Sample lightly, replace what you disturb, and treat every mat as a living neighborhood, not a pile of weeds. Law follows culture here. People who love the calm teach the next crew how to be guests, not owners. 6 quick postcards keep the story human. A turtle the size of 2 hands naps under a raft and rises for a breath with a tiny bubble on its nose. A sargassum fish rests motionless for 5 minutes and then unfolds a mouth like a flipbook to inhale a shrimp. A 20-yard weed line vibrates with baby jacks, each silver coin flashing as it turns. A yacht stops dead, the engine coughs, the temperature gauge climbs, and a crew member clears a clogged strainer with a twist of a bucket lid. A drifter with a long tail loops in the same gyre eddy for 100 days and sends its location like a heartbeat. A storm erases a week-old slick in one night, then the next calm draws a new one on the same patch 3 days later. None of these are miracles. Together they feel like one. A lightning-fast FAQ answers the most common curiosities without breaking the vibe. Can ships get stuck? Not in the seaweed the way stories say. Calms slow them, and thick lines can foul intakes or props. But motion never ceases. Is it dangerous to swim? In fair weather, crews swim from stern ladders all the time. Depth is vast, so common sense and a line to the boat are non-negotiable. Is it a trash island? No, it's a convergence where natural weed mingles with scattered debris, wide, thin, and always moving. How deep is it? Thousands of meters in many places. The bottom is far beyond sight. Can you see the bottom? No. The clarity is real. The depth is greater. A short field guide shows how to document what looks empty. Log GPS. Note watercolor. Estimate weed density in simple words. Light lines, patchy rafts, solid streaks, and take photos that include the horizon for scale. A quick dip net sample reveals more life than an hour of staring. Replace what's scooped. Move on. The maze is not a museum diorama. It's a city that deserves respectful visitors. Stories and art have always filled the calm with personality. Old maps painted brown gold swirls onto blank blue. Novels sent sailors into doldrum dreams and made the weed a chorus. Modern artists paint the fronds like lace floating on sapphire. The trick for any storyteller is to keep the drama where it belongs, in the patience and the strange quiet, not in invented dangers. The real sea is interesting enough. The decade ahead will sharpen the picture. Models that resolve eddies more cleanly will forecast weed lines like short-term weather. Tagging work on eels will tighten the loop from river to calm and back. A new high seas treaty framework will help turn goodwill into shared rules. Plastics policy on shore will change what arrives offshore. Citizen science will make the maze feel smaller and better known as sailors and crews log observations and photos into shared maps. The calm will not belong to anyone, but it will be known by more people who treat it right. The next beat in this calm story lives on a map that few carry in their pocket, but many have heard about, in pieces. The wide ribbon of Sargassum that sometimes spans the Atlantic closer to the tropics. That ribbon is not the same as the gyre's golden maze. Its pulses ride river outflows, dust from deserts, and seasonal upwelling in the equatorial belt. In heavy bloom years, islands in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico wake to brown surf that smells like tide pools magnified 1,000 times. Bulldozers push knee-high heaps off beaches in lines, Community crews pull seaweed by hand so fishermen can reach moorings. Then the season turns, the ribbon thins, and the photogenic, quiet mats far to the north keep drifting as usual. 2 stories, 1 plan. The fix is simple and powerful. It helps to say Great Atlantic Sargasso Belt when talking about the tropical bloom years, and Sargasso Sea when talking about the calm subtropical nursery. Precision shrinks confusion and opens space for real talk about causes and cures. Out in the gyre's center, the changes people worry about move more slowly but cut just as deep. The top of the ocean is layered like a cake, warm on the surface, cooler below. When the surface warms more, the layers resist mixing. That stratification is like a lid that keeps the pantry closed. Nutrients that would occasionally stir up from below stay trapped. In the Sargasso Sea, which already runs lean, that can mean fewer chances for background plankton to bloom, longer runs of extraordinary clarity, and even more importance added to the floating oases. Researchers set instruments to record temperature, oxygen, and light through the year, and tie their records to simple scenes: mats thicker in late summer, thinner after a storm sequence, a shift in what tiny grazers dominate a frond in spring versus autumn. None of this belongs to alarm or to denial. It belongs to watchfulness. A living map needs updates. Routing lore makes the watchfulness practical. When a square rigger captain plotted a course across this region, edges mattered more than centers. The Gulf Stream's shoulder offered speed, but bit back with fog and eddies. The Canary Current's return lane carried southbound ships toward Africa at a pace steady enough to plan by. Between those bookends lay the quiet middle. Sailing ships feared that middle less for weeds than for time lost. Steam and then diesel shrank the fear, but not the wisdom. Modern passage notes still say, in plain words, that weed lines can slow water makers and choke small intakes. They also say that a day and a half of lighter wind near 30 taken in is not a reason to panic. A crew with patience can time departures to catch a sequence of trade wind days, cross the maze near its flanks, and keep the logbook tidy. Trade routes and mail packets wove the Sargasso Sea into everyday life in a way that stories sometimes miss. Insurance adjusters read calms near the latitude of the horse, like doctors read temperatures. A useful detail, not a mystery. Packet captains in the 19th century followed schedules that touched this sea again and again. Their logs gave it shape: wind variable and baffling, sea rippleless, weed abundant in long streaks. They kept going. The calm did not stop commerce. It taught discipline to those who wanted to move wool and letters, news and people, from one side of the ocean to the other. A steamer in 1892 lists weed-choking condenser intake cleared at 4 bells, as casually as a car today lists windshield wiper replaced. These ordinary lines are proof that the maze is part of the real sea, not a stage set. In the present, voyaging teams meet the same patterns with radios, apps, and the same old eyes. A cruiser sliding east from the Bahamas to the Azores notes 3 kinds of days: easy trade wind days with windrows marching past like lines on a page, glass days where swimming is too tempting to refuse, and awkward days where lumped swell rolls the boat while the breeze hides. On weed-heavy days, the crew times watermaker cycles for cleaner lanes, runs a fine mesh strainer ahead of the intake, and keeps a bucket and a short hose ready to flush the line if the gauge climbs. A racer crossing nearby checks the rudder for a telltale tremble that says a strand has hooked on the leading edge. The fix is quick: back down for 5 seconds, then go. In both boats, the calm becomes a classroom. Hands learn and remember. Cameras turn the classroom into memory. A phone pressed over the side catches a universe at arm's length. Copods flick like punctuation marks. A shrimp hovers with arms cocked, like a tiny boxer. A sargassum fish pivots without moving any visible limb, and somehow faces the lens as if embarrassed to be seen. An ROV lowers on a tether and shows the underside of the raft as a roof with skylights, jagged holes where sunlight pours through, each shaft a stage where small fish rise and fall like elevator riders. A child leaning over a 5-gallon bucket sees more than many adults do in a day, and that is a note worth holding. This is a place that rewards anyone who slows down long enough to look closely. Chemistry explains the pictures, without stealing their calm. At midday near a mat, oxygen can spike, because the plant, busy with sunlight, releases it into the thin layer of water around each leaf. Move down a few meters, and the oxygen curve softens. At night, the mat breathes like any living thing and consumes oxygen, shifting the balance. Nutrients at the surface stay scarce most days until weather mixes the deck. When an eddy lifts deeper water slightly closer to the light, a faint green blush can spread through the blue, subtle from a deck, clear as numbers in a lab. The mat harvests those pulses like a roof garden that catches every rain. The chemistry never feels like homework when a narrator keeps sentences grounded in sight, smell, and touch. A faint plant scent in a slick, a fizzing edge under a fingertip, water so clear that a silver fish in morning light looks like a coin resting on glass. The quiet here is audible, if anyone listens. With fewer shipping lanes than coasts, the Sargasso Sea often sits under a lower acoustic ceiling. A hydrophone hears a snap from a pistol shrimp, a whoop from a distant whale, a crackle like a gentle fire. When a mat teems with life, sound travels far in water. In this calm zone, individual notes don't get buried as quickly by engine hum. Night brings a richer chorus because so many small animals climb toward the surface to feed in the cover of dark. The mat becomes a listening post. Predators use both eyes and ears, sight in the long light, sound when the sky turns black velvet and the blue turns to ink. Questions about stewardship arrive naturally once readers and viewers care. Who guards a place without walls? The answer comes in layered voices that match the ocean's layers. Governments with a stake in the North Atlantic cooperate through a commission that advocates for the Sargasso Sea's protection. Scientists keep sending expeditions and publishing open maps that let more people see the invisible edges. Fishers adopt best practices voluntarily because they want a living sea to fish tomorrow. High seas anjas accumulate clauses that, taken together, give shape to good behavior in places beyond national borders. It is slow work. It is the only kind that lasts long enough to matter. Ethics on a drifting forest are simpler to say and harder to live. Fish gather under mats, so nets set in the wrong way will catch more than anyone wanted. Turtles need to surface, so lines strung carelessly can become walls. Research teams can trample a mat structure just as surely as a careless tourist can trample a dune. The practical answer is to behave as if every mat is a small village. Approach slowly, take only what is needed for the lesson at hand, put back what can live, and leave no gear behind. Many crews already treat the Sargasso Sea this way because it feels right. Law follows culture, and culture follows leaders who model respect. The maze is generous with micro-stories. A juvenile loggerhead turtle naps in the dapple and lifts its head every few minutes for a breath with a soft. The same turtle will one day be heavy and plain-looking, a brown loaf with flippers. But here it is spinning slowly in gold like a child under a mobile. A sargassum fish does not move for 5 long minutes. Then a tiny shrimp drifts too close and the fish's mouth opens as if a button has been pressed. A sudden geometry lesson: flat becomes a funnel. Funnel becomes a trap, and then the face returns to normal. And only a few crumbs float where a whole creature was a second before. Along a weed line, baby jacks school in the seam, each a flash of silver that bends light into laughter if anyone is close enough to watch. A cruising boat's engine hiccups, the temperature gauge climbs, and a calm voice says what needs saying. Shut it down. A crew member unscrews a strainer cap, and chopped weed tumbles into a bucket in a brown-green curl. The boat breathes again when the line is clear. A drifter sets out with a drogue, its little underwater parachute, and loops for 100 days inside one eddy before slipping into the next lane. A storm arrives and erases a week-old slick in a single night. 3 days later, new lines draw themselves where the wind says the fingers should point. None of these scenes require exaggeration. The small truths are the ones that prove the place exists. Common questions land like small stones in a pocket and deserve quick, satisfying answers that anyone can repeat. Can a ship get stuck in Sargasso weed? Not in the way a person gets stuck in mud. Calm, slow a voyage. Thick lines can foul an intake or a propeller. Both problems are manageable. Is it dangerous to swim here? In settled weather with a line to the boat and a lookout, crews swim in the blue and call it the best swim of their lives. Depth is vast, so respect is non-negotiable. Is the Sargasso Sea a floating garbage island? No, it is a natural convergence where clean living mats share space with scattered debris. Because physics doesn't sort by virtue. How deep is it? In the very middle, often thousands of meters. The bottom is not part of this story for eyes. Can the bottom be seen? Never. The clarity of the water makes a playful liar of the mind. But the distance is greater than any mask can bridge. Some crews treat the maze like an open-air museum and keep a simple routine to make their notes useful later. They log GPS and time. They describe the watercolor, deep cobalt, milkier blue, near a slick, and estimate weed density in plain words. They take photographs with the horizon in frame, so a viewer can judge scale. They toss a dip net for a half-minute to see who lives in the fringe, and let it all slide back into place afterward. The act of writing makes the calm less abstract. A museum guard once said, "People take care of what they can name." The same is true at sea. Stories and art pulled the Sargasso Sea into culture long before satellite maps gave the oval clean edges. Old charts painted brown fans into the Atlantic's empty spaces. Novelists sent becalmed crews into strange states of mind and made the weed a companion. Painters today render the fronds as lace on blue, the bladders like strings of amber beads. Musicians who spent time offshore write songs that mention weed lines like roads, because after a week of the maze, that is exactly how they feel. Lanes drawn by a patient hand. The trick storytellers keep learning is to let the real thing be enough. No haunted ships, no whispering curses, just windless days, golden rafts, and traveling beings using calm the way city walkers use parks. The way forward looks a lot like the way here. More eyes, better data, gentler hands, numerical models that can see eddies more clearly will predict where mats concentrate, not just this week, but 2 days from now in a way a small boat can use. Tagging programs on eels will draw the loop in crisper lines that children can follow with a finger across a map. Treaty tools for the high seas will turn quiet agreements into shared rules with teeth, so that a drifting forest receives the same respect from hulls that it receives from stories. Policies that keep plastics at home will mean fewer clear bottles and frayed ropes, sharing space with fish nurseries 1,000 miles out. Sailors and scientists will keep adding notes to shared databases that mark slicks and rafts, because a world map made from calm reports is itself a kind of protection. Where practical lives sit, the maze keeps giving small instructions. A skipper sees a storm on the horizon and knows weed lines will reorganize behind it. An intake that ran clean yesterday might clog today, and the temperature gauge is the sentence that matters. A researcher plans a cruise for a season when eddies are forecast to pin rafts in predictable lanes, then trains students to write what they see like field naturalists instead of tourists. A family on a long passage anchors a jar of clean water and a jar with a pinch of frond under a shady dodger, and checks oxygen levels with a cheap sensor every hour for 1 day. The numbers write a curve that turns into a simple memory. Plants make breath under sun, then rest like everything else. A child on watch invents new names for shrimp that look like punctuation marks, commas, exclamation points, and ellipses that drift off the page. The calm hides edges that matter beyond biology. For a ship routing around weather, the Sargasso Sea can be a release valve. Miles of flatter water that turn a rough forecast into a long, gentle slide. For a sailing race, it can be a trap if a team forgets that weed on a keel is as damaging as an hour of poor steering. For an island far to the west that receives heavy landings of Sargasso during a belt year, the calm is part of a much larger conversation about rivers, fertilizers, and the loop that connects far coasts to far seas. The maze is mid-ocean, but its lessons walk up beaches and into city council meetings. Even from a classroom far inland, this sea is teachable without spectacle. A simple globe, a strip of paper to show wind, and a finger to show Earth's spin are enough to act out a gyre at a desk. A bowl of water, a pinch of tea leaves, and a spoon stirred in circles show convergence in the center and the way leaves gather into lines. A flashlight through a jar with floating flakes explains how skylights in a mat concentrate life in shafts. Those small calm experiments carry the same vibe the ocean gives. No hurry, no fear, plenty of wonder. Somewhere in the mid-Atlantic tonight, a yacht lies to a soft breeze, and a watchstander leans on the rail as the boat ghost walks along a caramel ribbon. Far above, a satellite stares at a bulge, a few centimeters tall, where the sea's surface is thicker in the gyre's middle. Far below, in deep cold water, silver eels glide toward a destiny that lives inside their bones, and inside a sea they have never seen until now. On a small raft of plants, the size of a city bus, a fish shaped like the plant waits for a meal that will appear and vanish in the same breath. The maze is not loud. It does not bang on the door of attention. It invites, it keeps inviting. The maze also writes a calendar. In late winter and early spring, winds slacken across the subtropics, and long blue corridors open with streaks of gold that travel in parallel like script across a page. By early summer, the sun has warmed the top layer into a gentle lid, and mats thicken. Young turtles shelter most easily now because cover is common. Late summer brings interruptions, tropical storms that rake the oval into arcs and tatters, then leave behind newly stitched lines when the breeze returns. Autumn often feels like a long exhale. Fewer squalls, glass mornings and evenings when the raft edges glow copper in low light. The calendar is not a rule book. It offers likelihoods. Crews who write down what they see add to a living almanac the sea itself is too busy to publish. Night transforms the scene without turning it into drama. On a moonless watch, the calm looks like a giant pane of smoked glass. When a light is dipped, small points kindled by startled plankton spark in blue-green, not because the Sargasso Sea is special for bioluminescence, but because it is special for quiet. Without many ships to beat the water, small signals are easy for eyes to read. A twinkle where a shrimp kicks, a long smear where a fish moves fast, a brief cataract of stars when a bow wave rolls through a weed line. A watchstander may whisper to no one in particular, "That looks like a galaxy," and then go back to checking the clock and scanning the horizon. Beauty here is a feature, not a warning. Human voices anchor the science without asking for spotlight. A navigator in an 1840s packet wrote, "We lay in smoothness all last night. The weed run in ranks as if sown." A research technician on a recent cruise entered into the log, "Surface visibility extraordinary. First dipnet haul contained 3 sargassum fish, each the exact color of the frond they hid in." A delivery skipper called in a position report and noted, "Cleared the strainer twice today. No big deal, just part of the crossing this week." A fisheries observer wrote, "Set gear away from the thickest lines. Saw 2 juvenile turtles in 10 minutes, moved north a mile." None of these statements try to turn the calm into something it isn't. Together they describe an ordinary that feels rare. Predators write the other side of the ledger politely. A dolphin pod will quarter along a seam where blue highway meets brown forest, taking advantage of the edge effect that concentrates small fish. Frigate birds, pirates with wings, trace weed lines high and wait for one careless flicker below to betray a shoal. Even far-traveling visitors, marlin, billfish, tuna, treat the maze as a refueling lane, not a destination. The golden roofs offer shade and snacks. The open streets around them belong to speed. Currents push the story forward, whether eyes watch or not. The Gulf Stream hauls warm water like a conveyor belt along the maze's western wall. The North Atlantic current carries that warmth east, like a story passed among friends. The Canary current delivers the tale toward Africa, calmer and cooler, and the North Equatorial current returns the book to its shelf. At the core, the gyre's slow inward nudge allows the forest to gather. A drifter buoy shows this without poetry. Its positions plot like lazy loops inside the oval, and then when a strong eddy steals it, a new lane begins with no announcement and no farewell. The buoy does not mind. It is doing its job. A practical aside keeps the maze friendly to hulls with engines. Intakes love clean water. When thick lines lie ahead, crews shift speed slightly so that the intake flow stays strong enough to pull leaves through grates rather than press them against screens. Some add a simple mesh pre-filter in the raw water line to catch fragments before they reach the exchanger. Temperature gauges become truth tellers. A slow rise means a pause is due. A bucket of clean water and a short hose can flush a strainer in less than a minute. Every one of these tasks is quiet, ritual, and on brand for a sea that rewards calm hands. The eel loop returns because it belongs in any ending the way a refrain belongs in a song. Mature eels leave rivers in autumn, head for the edge of the shelf, and then dive deep to travel with fewer predators around. They navigate in a world almost empty of obvious landmarks, temperature layers, currents they can feel, and cues that still surprise science. On the far end of the journey, in the Sargasso Sea, they spawn in water that looks empty to the eye and full to the life that counts. Their young ride home on lanes that humans can draw only after the fact. The final truth is humble and clear. The maze isn't just a place to cross. It is where entire life cycles close and begin again, invisibly and reliably. Law and culture meet on these waters without fanfare. A commission advocates for protection across an area beyond national jurisdiction. Partner governments and organizations push the conversation from goodwill to written guidance. Avoid destructive fishing around mats. Be mindful of bycatch. Report significant observations and consider the forest a nursery first and a convenience second. High Seas Treaty tools arriving this decade will give those habits more structure. The point is not to police a forbidden zone. The point is to make the default behavior respectful in a place where millions of small lives get their start. A few myths deserve kind retirements, so the real lore can breathe. The maze does not trap ships. It can slow them if the wind stops, and it can tangle an indifferent prop. But the sea always moves. The maze is not a trash island. Physics collects what floats, so natural rafts mix with human fragments. The fix lies upstream in cities, ports, and river mouths. The maze is not bottomless magic. Depths are normal for the open ocean, often several kilometers, and the water's clarity plays a trick on minds that expect green coastal murk. Removing these myths does not make the place smaller. It makes the actual features easier to see. Education turns the maze into a tool, the size of a classroom. A globe shows why winds ring the subtropics and how Earth's spin slides surface water sideways. A bowl and a spoon demonstrate convergence and windrows with tea leaves curled into lines. A clear jar with a pinch of frond and a cheap oxygen probe draws curves any student can read up in the sun, down in the dark. A paper map and a pencil trace the eel arcs, and a sticker marks nursery in the center. No hauntings required. The maze earns attention by being itself. Somewhere tonight, a research ship steams diagonally across the oval, and a night technician watches the echo sounder paint a curtain of bright dots. A few dozen meters down, the dots are the evening rise of plankton and tiny swimmers. Above that curtain, a raft of sargassum rides like a golden city on a black lake. A few hundred miles west, a family boat heaves to for dinner and drifts sideways across a weed line, so straight it might have been drawn with a ruler. Someone points a flashlight at the leaves and counts crabs for fun. 1,000 miles east, A mail plane skims the gyre's northern edge and the pilot notes cloud streets that rhyme with the water's slick streets below, far below them all, at depths cold enough to make lungs ache to think about them. Silver eels move with serene purpose, because that is what their bodies understand. Step by step, the story has turned from a blank patch on school maps into a working atlas in the mind. The Sargasso Sea lies where fast rivers of salt water draw a ring. Inside the ring, wind and spin press the surface inward and anward slightly, turning chop into sheen and letting floating forests gather. Those forests are not wreckage. They are living architecture, leaves and bladders, fronds and shadows, built to drift, shelter and feed. The water is blue because it is lean. The mats flip that script by catching crumbs and weaving them into meals. Nursery is not a metaphor here. Turtles nap and nibble. Fish grow teeth and reflexes in a maze designed by drift. Eels begin and end in a place that many people will never see but can nevertheless imagine clearly. Weed lines shift daily because eddies redraw the city blocks. Cameras reveal glows and shadows, and a bucket reveals more species than a quick glance ever will. Storms tear and restitch. Ships do not get stuck, but intakes demand care. Sound carries farther because the lanes are quiet. Stewardship matters more than ownership because borders do not exist. The myths that once cast the calm as a trap recede, and the reality that casts it as an engine comes forward. Watch out for this closing truth. Easy to remember and good to repeat. A calm sea can be busy, and a quiet map can be loud, with meaning. The Sargasso Sea looks like a pause when viewed from a distance. A motionless blue oval. Up close it is a machine that sorts, shelters and moves lives along. It collects the small things people drop and the small beings nature raises. It offers paths to turtles and eels, hunting edges to fish and birds, clear rooms for light to work deep. It asks only ordinary respect. Look carefully, handle gently, tell the truth about what it is and is not. The ending belongs to a picture, as steady as the gyre itself. A sailor watches the bow pass through a seam of weed that parts softly and closes behind, as if nothing had happened. A researcher in a shore lab reads a signal from a drifting buoy and notes that the loop it draws today is slightly oval, not round. A child far from the sea opens a book to a map, where a brown oval floats in the middle of blue and understands for the first time that oceans have places within places. A sea without walls has still taught a boundary lesson. Inside a nursery, outside highways, between them, exchange. The calm maze earns a promise. Read the slicks, protect the nursery, keep the story honest, and let the golden rafts keep drifting for the creatures that need them most.